Hey everyone. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please hit that subscribe button and the bell icon next to it to get notifications for all our latest videos. On July 20th, 1969, while the whole world was watching, NASA achieved a wonderful goal. That is, they made a man step on the moon for the first time. It has been about 53 years since that happened. And on December 1972, NASA last carried out a mission related to the moon. It has also been about 50 years since that happened. But even now, NASA has not tried to send a man to the moon again. In fact, compared to then, technology has increased a lot now and awareness has also increased a lot. But even so, NASA has not tried to replicate the success that happened in 1970. So let's find out in detail in this video why NASA has not tried to go to the moon again. So why is it late? Let's get into the video. One of the closest neighbors to Earth is the moon. If we measure the distance between the Earth and the moon on a cosmic scale, it is approximately 384,000 kilometers. So if we drive a vehicle at a speed of 40 miles per hour, we can reach the moon in about 6,000 hours. Astronomers used to travel very fast in the past, so they would have gone to the moon very fast. Uncrewed missions would have gone even faster, but manned missions would have gone a little late because the safety of the astronauts and the safety of the landing, all of these are very, very important, so they went a little slower. NASA's crewed missions have been about 9, including Apollo 8, Apollo 10, Apollo 13, and Apollo 6, which landed on the moon in just 78 hours, which is 3 days and 6 hours. Lunar, the quickest mission to reach orbit, was not Apollo 8, which took only 2 days and 21:08 minutes. The longest Apollo mission was Apollo 17, which took 3 days and 14:41 minutes. In these times, the missions that spent time in Earth orbit have also been added. However, many people have gone to the moon. They have told us many things about the moon. A lot of research is also being done to learn more about the moon. Even now, the idea that we should go to the moon and know about it has started. Where did the idea of going to the moon come from? How did the moon actually form? How did the moon's journey start? There are many theories about this. The most important hypothesis related to this is the joint impact hypothesis. The reason why the moon formed is that a large object hit the Earth. So at that time, some part of the Earth came out of the Earth and became the moon. Basically, the Earth also formed with the dust and gas left behind in our solar system. Another theory that came out of it is that the Sun was very, very young when the Earth formed. The solar system was in its very, very starting stages. At that time, the solar system was very violent. At that time, some bodies were created, including Earth, Pluto, and all of these. This is the theory of scientists. However, at that time, a space body called Theia hit the Earth. It was about the size of Mars. It came and hit the Earth. At that time, the entire Earth was vaporized. Small parts of the Earth went out. Due to the gravity in space, all those particles also came to one place. So that's how the moon was formed. It is our largest satellite, the only satellite. That's why many people accept this theory. The moon is made of much, much lighter elements. The density there is much lower than on Earth. So such to form with materials means to be made with materials that came from the Earth's crust, because when that asteroid hit the Earth, particles came out from the Earth's crust, but the rocky core underneath was not touched at all. So because of that, the moon was made of much lighter materials. So it is their belief that it happened because of the Earth. However, there are some people who oppose this too, because at that time, there is a possibility that the materials related to the asteroid also came out. And if those two materials of the Earth were mixed, then the moon should have been in a different position than the one it is in now. And why that did not happen is the theory of some people. So no one has an exact answer to this. However, there is another theory called the co-formation theory. This is even more interesting. This principle says what our planets were at that time. They say that the moons also formed at the same time as they were forming. This theory tells us that just as the Earth, when the solar system was in its early stages, combined all the different types of materials and became a planet, the moon also formed at the same time. They believe that all this happened because of gravity. If that happened, then the moon should also have a similar composition. Their theory is that in fact, the compositions on Earth are also matching in some places on the moon. So they take this as an example and support this theory. A scientist named Robin Canopy says that the Earth and the moon formed at the same time. What is the reason for these two formations? That they were two separate objects, that is, that they came and hit the Earth. This is the previous theory, but what does she say? That they are two separate objects. Both massive objects are about 5 times larger than Mars. Her theory is that when both of them collided, the Earth and the moon formed. However, in this theory, collisions are very common. What she is saying is that unless a collision occurs, there is no possibility of any object forming in space. She says that when two similar objects collide, different types of objects form. So, her intention is that the Earth and the Moon formed. However, there is also a third theory which does not involve any collision. This theory says that the Earth's gravity trapped a passing body in its gravity and turned it into its own satellite. However, she says that this is not such a rare event in space. Other planets also pull their moons towards them and give them moons. There are cases where they have changed. For example, Mars has two twin moons, Phobos and Deimos. Mars also attracted both of them towards itself. So according to this theory, either they formed somewhere else in the solar system or they formed somewhere outside the solar system. When they entered our solar system, due to the gravity of those planets, they got trapped in that gravity and became their satellites. If not, where does this theory go wrong? In the eyes of some scientists, if they did become satellites, then they should not be like spherical bodies but should be in any shape they want. Also, the path that those moons have now should not be as it is. Now, when we have solar eclipses and lunar eclipses, we can see those paths very clearly. So, they should have such proper paths, that is, they must be exactly that. Even though no one knows exactly how the scientist theory came about, there were very successful programs to land on the moon in the 1960s and 1970s. And do you know where it all started? President John F. Kennedy spoke about this in his special meeting time. Since then, there has been a lot of growth on this. A joint session of Congress was held on that day, May 25, 1961. What he said was that this country must be committed to achieving this goal. Before the end of this decade, we must land a man on the moon and bring him back safely to Earth. He said that if we want to talk about NASA's moon missions, we must also talk about the space race that was going on at that time. There was a very, very fierce space race going on between the Soviet Union and the US. A few weeks before Kennedy gave his speech, Russia launched a person into space for the first time. Yuri Gagarin himself broke the record for being the first man to travel all over the Earth in a single spacecraft and become the first man to go into space. So, let's try very hard from the point of view of sending a man to the moon. So, the Kennedy's More program got a lot of support at that time and it was called the Apollo mission, and 5 years later, 5 years after the president gave his speech, the first unmanned space mission was launched to the moon. After that, the space agency tried to launch manned missions to the moon. They tried to launch from the Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida. But tragedy struck them because there was a fire accident and the 3 astronauts on board died. But NASA didn't stop there. 18 months later, Apollo 7 was started. It successfully orbited the entire Earth and properly tested all those sophisticated systems. So it must be said that it provided an organ that was needed to take astronauts to the moon. And the Apollo mission is the only thing that people remember about landing on the moon and setting foot on the moon. But NASA had sent some astronauts to another part of the moon before that. If not in March 1969, they did not land there. They just checked it all. That was the Apollo 8 mission. And in the same year, NASA sent 3 more astronauts to the orbit of the moon through Apollo 10 and conducted a dry run there. That is, this is a very, very big event because later humans are going to land. So, it is necessary to take precautions before that. So, they did everything for that. So finally, on July 16, 1969, while the whole world was watching, the Apollo 11 mission was launched by Kennedy. It was launched from the Space Center into space, and 2 very famous people, Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong, set out to step on the moon. Neil Armstrong was the commander of that mission, but there was another astronaut with them whose name is not known to many people. His name is Michael Collins. He was 39 years old at the time. After a journey of about 76 hours, Apollo 11 reached lunar orbit on July 19th. The next day at 1:46 p.m., the lunar module Eagle completely separated. And it were Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. They separated from the command module. Collins remained in it. 2 hours after this, the Eagle slowly started to land on the moon. So at about 4:17 minutes, the moon landed on the moon and the module touched down on the sea of it, landed near the southwestern edge of the Tranquility area. Immediately, information about this went to the mission control in Houston, Texas. That was one of the most famous messages in the world. That message was sent by the Eagle. So at 10:39 p.m., about 5 hours later than expected, the hatch of the lunar module was opened. Neil Armstrong and the television camera attached to the module's lid were recording it. They went down, and while they were recording, he stepped on the moon for the first time and millions of people on Earth saw it live. So according to an estimate, at 10:56 minutes, Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon for the first time, and he also said the most famous quotation in the world: "One small step for a man, one joint life for mankind." Then, another 19 minutes later, Buzz Aldrin also stepped on the moon. They landed on the surface, they took some photos, they took pictures of the moon, they took pictures of them, and they also put a US flag there. they also took some samples for scientific tests, and the president's phone call also happened at that time. Richard Nixon was the president at that time. So at 1:1 minutes, that is, on July 21st in the early morning, the two astronauts also went back into the lander and closed the hatch. Then the two of them slept there that night. The next day, the Eagle joined the command module again, and when they came back, they also took many samples. So then, together with Collins, they returned home. They landed in the Pacific Ocean at 12:50 minutes on July 22nd. And from then on, Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong became very big heroes. They became instant celebrities. And after that, NASA repeated the moon landing 5 times, finally stopping on December 14, 1972. NASA had already sent a dozen people to the satellite of the Earth. They all walked there. There were many of them there. But the last to step on the moon were Harrison Smith and Eugene Cernan. They both stepped on the moon as part of the Apollo 17 mission. So by then, NASA had planned 20 Apollo missions, but the last 3 were canceled. What exactly happened next? After achieving all the successes, why did they step back again? All these questions remain unanswered. In fact, NASA also had a plan at that time. That is, they wanted to set up a fuel depot on the moon. That is, if we wanted to send a spacecraft into deep space, we would have to refuel on the moon instead of refueling from here. If they had a depot, they thought it would be even more amazing if they could go there and refuel and go to different places from there. So, they wanted to launch a large number of telescopes for that. As part of that, the James Webb Telescope was also launched. They are planning more manned missions to Mars and, in fact, to the moon. They also wanted to start tourism on it. But what were the difficulties that NASA faced in the meantime? What were the difficulties? The first difficulty was that many people opposed this Apollo mission. When Apollo 11 flew into space, everyone applauded happily. If you think that it was our mistake because many people opposed it. There was a group of 500 people, all of them African American protesters. The person leading them was Ralph Alberti, a civil rights leader who stood outside the gate of the Kennedy Space Center and protested continuously. In fact, some of the he also brought and started protesting through them, and his idea was that whatever money is spent on these rockets and these experiments, it would be good if that amount was also spent on all those who are struggling to eat and have no place to stay. His idea was that this person named Abernathy was a very, very big associate of Martin Luther King, so a year after NASA launched Armstrong and his fellow astronauts, Abernathy and all his comrades started doing continuous shows about this, and some others started opposing the Apollo space program at that time. Gradually, they thought that why did they think that it was such a waste of money? Otherwise, the number of people supporting the Apollo mission was very high, more than 50 to 60% supported it, of 40% of the people. Only they considered it as a waste of money, they considered it as a misplaced priority, that is, the Americans spent $20 billion to send a man to the moon, so it would have been better if they had focused on the underlying financial and political problems, and it could have been racial discrimination, pollution, gender inequality, it could have been all of these. Abernathy and the rest of them thought that it would have been better if they had spent money on all of these. Abernathy and the rest of them talked about this with NASA Administrator Thomas Paine at the time. He also asked him to support their movement. He told them to focus on poverty, hunger, and social problems. Paine agreed to that, but NASA did their job and did this. That is, they also fulfilled the promises they had made to Abernathy. They sent NASA engineers some space capsules to measure urban air pollution. They developed technology, so they learned about pollution and took all the measurements related to it. To reduce that pollution, they also installed technology to know about the conditions of some areas on Earth in another spacecraft. But even these could not satisfy them. In 1969, a year after they landed on the moon, a man named Gil Scott-Aaron wrote and sang a song that became very, very popular at that time. He sang that song opposing that mission. So many people were against it, many were positive about it. So it is going on like that. And at the same time, many people did not like America's entry into the Vietnam War against the Soviet Union. A month after Neil Armstrong returned to Earth, 5 lakh people protested against it and conducted a music festival somewhere. You can understand how much opposition there was at that time. Although people were not very interested in it at that time, now people are very interested in it. Interest has grown. At the time of the Apollo missions, only 53% of Americans said it was worth the project, and everyone else tried to oppose it, but that's not the case now. A recent study found that 60% of Americans want NASA to go back to the moon. They consider this a very important goal. Only 38% of them think it would be better to spend the money on something on Earth. What they are saying is that instead of sending humans to the moon, it would be better to send robots. Robots can explore just as humans can explore, so sending robots is enough, and it doesn't cost much. And 63% of people say that NASA should focus on deep space or sending humans to Mars instead of focusing on the moon. They are thinking of doing better. So maybe Elon Musk will have a big problem in getting volunteers in the future, but he won't be able to find them because many people are interested in his Mars ambition, so there are chances that anyone will accept him. And what 91% of people are saying is that NASA should focus more on the sky. They should try to prevent killer asteroids from hitting Earth. That's what 91% of people are thinking. So NASA should focus more on this for now because that's what many people want. But the biggest problem NASA has is that they don't get much funding for their space missions right now because space missions are very, very expensive, and at the same time they are very risky for human life. They are very complicated missions. And if we take NASA's budget for 2022 as an example, Congress has allocated $24 billion. This may seem like a huge amount to them, but considering the programs that NASA runs, it is not enough for them to send it to the moon. The James Webb Telescope is a member of the Impact Telescope. Its cost is about $10 billion. In addition, NASA is funding the Space Launch System, SLS, which will be very useful in the future, but it also requires a very large amount of money. NASA has also given $4 billion to SpaceX for the Lunar Human Landing System. NASA will also have to fund some missions related to the moon. Missions related to Jupiter, Kuiper Belt missions, Nancy Gray Space Telescope, etc. If you keep saying this, you will have to go through one or two lists. So whatever budget they have allocated is not enough. Even if they gave the US military an amount of $777 billion last year, it is very small compared to that. As NASA has been saying for the past few decades, if we look at the NASA budget, it has been decreasing. In the US total budget, the NASA budget, which was 4% of the total federal budget in 1965, is now less than 1%, which means that the amount is not coming in much. In fact, President Donald Trump said that he will send people to the moon again and visit Mars as well. He also said that he will sign a contract for that. But did that program work? No, it was stopped. There was not enough funding for that. So why are they not conducting Apollo missions again? How much will they cost? Basically, some recent estimates have shown that they did it in 2005, but they said that it would cost $104 billion. That means that due to inflation, the cost has now increased to $133 billion. So, the chances of that amount being somewhere between $120 and $140 billion are very high. Okay, spending that amount is not a big problem, but the US has the problem is that politics are changing so much. Administrations change all the time. So the federal government can't focus on one thing in particular. If Trump's ideas work out, we could go to the moon again. But Trump didn't win a second term, so that mission stopped there. So the presidencies keep changing from time to time. Their ideologies keep changing. Each one wants to explore space in its own way. In 2004, George Washington Bush's administration wanted to completely replace NASA with the space shuttle. It wanted to send astronauts to the moon using a rocket called Harris. It also wanted to use a spaceship called Ariane. But what's the use? After spending $9 billion in 5 years, doing most of the designs, testing all the hardware, President Barack Obama, he came and changed it completely, and I don't need it anymore. I'm focusing on something else. For example, James Webb, Hubble, Voyager, Juno. He said that we will know a lot through these. He stopped all the old programs and gave approval to the SLS rocket program. So Obama succeeded in that, but after Trump came, he changed it again. What did Obama think? He wanted to send astronauts to an asteroid. But what happened after Trump came? All those priorities shifted to the moon and Mars. So because of all these frequent changes, NASA had a situation where they didn't know what to do and what not to do. Cancellation after cancellation, cancellation after cancellation. So because of these cancellations, approximately 20 billion colors were lost. Do you know, NASA wasted many years of time. The momentum was wasted, and NASA had another problem is that public support for going to the moon, funding politics aside, going to the moon is not such a simple task. It is very, very difficult. The moon may look normal to us from here, but when we go there, it turns into a death trap. Those who want to set foot there must be very, very careful. In fact, some astronauts have gone to the moon. They all knew when they went to the moon that there was a high chance that they would not come back. Did you know that President Nixon prepared a speech for that event? There was a positive speech and a negative speech. Only the positive speech was given to us later, but we did not know about the negative speech at the time. It was only after many years that the speech was released to the public. That means NASA knew that there was a high chance that they would die. Bizarre Neil Armstrong is back with the callings. The chances of joining are very low, so they are lucky if they join they will return to Earth, otherwise they will not. Their point is that if they stay there, they will still be thrown out there and no one will come for them again because they will not send anyone to save them after spending all the billions of dollars. So they will still have to die there without food or they will have to commit suicide. What's more, if they take off the whole suit once, they will die. So those speeches were prepared in two ways. In them, he says very clearly that the painful incident that happened to those who went to the moon is unforgettable. Fate took them away, but I wish they could be at peace there. But whatever sacrifice they made, not only Americans but everyone on Earth will recognize and respect it. They will be the ones who showed a way to humanity. They will be the ones who gave humanity a great victory. But it is very sad that their lives ended like that. Not only America but the entire world is mourning them, saying that Mother Earth sent two of her brave sons to another place, and they died a heroic death there. There was such a speech, but it came out a few decades later, so we didn't know at that time that there were chances of them dying. They were already preparing speeches because it was such a risk. Tell me what happened in 1969. NASA had already taken a lot of precautions. Before sending these satellites, they sent different satellites, i.e. unmanned satellites, manned satellites, and everything. They knew the entire surface of the moon, took it like a map, checked the Latin sites, and only then sent them. Imagine that the Apollo 11 mission landed near a soft area, and it would sink in that area and there would be no chance of coming out again. Or suppose it landed near an area with a half-height platform, it would fall sideways and the whole thing would crash. They will die there. There are many such problems. There is also a lot of moon dust. They have to deal with that too. There are many such problems. They have to overcome so many problems and set foot there. So that's why NASA is not interested in going there again. The moon does not have a protective atmosphere. Because of that, that area is very, very bad. If there is a small problem in our spaceship, if there is a small problem in the vehicle, if there is a problem in any of the systems, the astronauts will die immediately. They will merge into those clouds. In fact, they took some buggies and traveled there. But at that time, a little more dust came out than what was tested before. So they have to be able to withstand that too. So, technologically, they reached that area and came back to Earth safely after overcoming many problems. So now, if we want to do all that again, it is very difficult. Due to this, millions of dollars are spent and a few years of research time are also wasted. In fact, it is difficult for us to live there continuously because there are chances that sunlight will kill us. There is sunlight continuously for 14 days on the moon and there is darkness continuously for 14 days without an atmosphere. So it is a very difficult situation for us to live in these two atmospheres. So it is very difficult for those who have gone to the moon to stay on the moon. Therefore, many people have not shown interest in going to the moon again. And NASA may be their workforce or they may be their agency. They have many talented individuals. They do not want to send them to the moon and lose them. And do you know what was found in a recent study? American kids want to be NASA astronauts. They want to be YouTube stars. That is, they want to be YouTube stars. There are 90% of them, so you can understand that many people have lost interest in working at NASA. In fact, the age of the youngest astronauts in NASA at that time was between 26 and 34. Do you know how old the youngest astronauts are now? They are about 60 years old. On average, if the average was 26 then, the average is 60 now. So no one is interested. There is no point in sending them because of that. No one is ready to go up and lose their lives. So that's why NASA is still not interested in going to the moon. So because of all these problems, NASA stopped going to the moon. So that's it, guys. This is the video. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe now. Click the bell icon next to it and put it on all.